I think Mossad and the United States create this aura of invincibility and that they know it all, and the Iranians like to play with that a lot. And the Iranians they played with them quite effectively. And as we see with the military, I mean, if the Israeli regime and the Americans had so much intelligence on Iran, they wouldn't have carried out these two catastrophic wars. They would have known what exists in Iran's underground missile cities, what exists in Iran's underground drone cities. They have no clue about what the capabilities of the country really are. So, but in any case,
just on that one, I want to say, like, my counterpoint to you was, I think you're dismissing their capabilities. And look what they did. The Hamas leader, for example, when he was in Iran, they knew which hotel room they planted a device. Also, all the leadership in Iran, which we're going to talk about, the leadership who replaced him recently, who was appointed by Mujtaba Khamenei. But the leadership that was targeted and assassinated, other than the supreme leader who was in his home, other leaders were targeted throughout the war. But your counterpoint of, it wasn't meant as a counterpoint, but the point you made about not knowing how the war will turn out, but also Iran's missile capabilities and the ability to fire missiles, fire drones. Trump saying he was surprised that they fired at the Gulf, kind of makes your point that maybe either the intelligence was good and the U.S. was misled, but then the U.S. Trump was misled by the intelligence community intentionally, or the intelligence community genuinely had false intelligence and expected the war to go differently.
Well, there's talk of deceit and deception and deceiving the American people nowadays. But I don't think targeting Iranian leaders was a great intelligence coup. Ayatollah Khamenei was in his office, and there's nothing extraordinary about that. And the other leaders, I mean, the United States is the only regime in the contemporary world that assassinates leaders and targets, So the Americans and the Israelis, what they do is that they bomb apartment blocks, kill everyone inside so that they can get one person. I guess the Iranians underestimated the barbarism of the U.S. military and of course, the similarities that exist between the United States and the Israeli regime. What the Israelis do in Lebanon and Gaza, the United States does too. Perhaps that was that they underestimated. But except for the first couple of days, as we move forward, they didn't. The assassination attempts became less and less effective, and ultimately, the Iranians defeated them. They've defeated the combined force of the United States, the Israeli regime, and those proxies in the Persian Gulf that facilitated this war. And by the way, these regimes in the Persian Gulf that were part of the war, not only did they provide space, but I'm sure you know that those bases, they pay for the U.S. presence in these bases. It's not as if all costs are paid for by the Americans. No, they subsidize. They do more than subsidize. They pay for a lot of what goes on in these bases. So they shoulder a lot of the financial burden of the wars against Iran, and they helped us, both the Americans and the Israeli regime, because the refueling planes that would fly, American refueling planes, they would refuel both American planes, but also Israeli planes in the war. So these countries were effectively in a coalition with the Israelis and the Americans in assaulting Iran. And I've always said that Iran should demand reparations from each and every one of these countries. But anyway, so
there were reports from Iran today that the Emiratis have been delivering billions of dollars and gold to Iran. There was a report today. I saved it. It came out just not long ago, but that's from Iranian sources. The UAE has released several $1 billion of Iran's frozen assets held in Emirati banks, including 2 tons of gold worth $283 million, with the goal being that Iran spares the United Arab Emirates from future attacks, according to multiple senior sources in Tehran with knowledge of the transfers. The assets were flown to Iran aboard a Boeing 737, blah, 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 operated by who, blah, blah, blah. And
who they went.
Oh, you didn't see that? That came from Iranian sources.
No, which news agency said that?
And not one of the major. I want to say this: it's not a major news outlet. These are not a major Iranian news outlets or Western news outlets. But there's been multiple Olsen accounts pointing at a lot of Emirati jets flying to Iran for an hour or two and then flying back. And even today, they fly for 1 hour and then they return. They fly for 1 hour and then they return. And there's been rumors about the UAE delivering a lot of money to Iran for a while. And for me, I'm not surprised. I've been saying this could happen for a while because the Emiratis, they've done business with Iran for a long time and they need stability. Their whole model depends on stability. We've discussed this a while ago. So I'm not saying this is true. This is all unconfirmed.
Well,
But I wouldn't be surprised.
even if this were true, which I can't confirm, but these are not reparations. According to this report, these are stolen Iranian assets. So returning stolen assets is not a favor. It's like me stealing your car and then returning it to you, and you thank me for the car.
It's a bit different. These are sanctions imposed by the US and the Western world. That the Emirates should abide by those sanctions. So for the Emirates to unfreeze assets, there must be a deal done with the US as well to allow them to do that. There must be a lot of things happening behind the scenes. You make a valid point. This is not extra money paid, but I definitely see it as a significant gesture. If there's billions that has been unfrozen, that's a lot of money.
Well, we'll have to see. Time will definitely tell. But going back to the initial point that you made, yes, it's clear that overwhelmingly Iranians would like to see Trump killed and executed or put on trial or whatever. And I think the same is true with all those who pulled the trigger and killed, whether in Mina, where they killed all those little children, elementary school kids, mostly girls, or in Lamer, where they bombed on the first day of the war too. They bombed a sports complex, killing a lot of little young women, teenagers who were playing volleyball. And apparently that was an experimental missile, which did pretty good in wiping out those, young teenager girls. But so yeah, I think the Iranians would like us to see a lot of Americans and Israelis executed, pilots and anyone else who was involved. But I don't think the government would be involved in this sort of thing. And I personally think that probably the Israelis made a fool out of Trump. And Trump, of course, what he did was cowardly. No one, all those. I mean, let's assume that the threat was real. Whatever, a group, a militant group, or whoever. All those journalists were allowed to be sacrificial lambs for Trump. I mean, I find that pretty disgusting.
I had one of my guests yesterday, an American guest, got really upset at me because I was bringing up that topic, and I said, I don't advocate. I think if Iran decides to assassinate Trump, I think that doesn't work to the advantage of Iran, because Iran is seen as the victim of a war of aggression. And, as you seek revenge or as you do things like this, it moves the needle away from being a victim more to it was being an aggressor. I'm not saying it suddenly moved from being a victim to an aggressor, but if Iran kills Trump, more of an aggressor, bombs a school, more of an aggressor, declares war on the US, more of an aggressor. And the Iran knows this, and that's why I don't think they'd be trying to kill Trump. So I was making that argument, and I also pointed that I don't advocate for the assassination of Trump, and they got really upset. I said, Mario, that's the way of thinking is not right at all. What the US has the right to kill the supreme leader of Iran, and Iran doesn't have the right to kill the president. And then my counterpoint to that was,
I'm sure the slave owners. I'm sure American slave owners in the 19th century had the same mentality.
So the point that I made, though, is I said, two wrongs doesn't make a right. So I don't think Iran should kill the president of the United States, whether now or later. The same way Iran, just because their leader was killed, the same way I don't think Iran should bomb a school in the US just because their school is bombed. I think Iran should seek justice. That is their right, and I hope they get justice. I don't think they will. Unfortunately, that's not how the world works. But that was my position. I think from our discussions, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're in a similar position as I. You don't think Iran should try to assassinate the president of the United States. Is that fair to say?
One thing I would just clarify first, and that if A assassinates B, the leader of B, and B retaliates and assassinates the leader of A, that's retaliation. That's not illegitimate. Doesn't make both sides an aggressor. The side that started it is the aggressor. But in any case, I don't think that Iran is going to put any money or anything like that into such an operation. I think the Iranians have said that Trump deserves this. All those people who murdered Iranians and the children, and the same is true in Gaza and elsewhere, that they are killers and they deserve to be punished and they should be on trial like in Nuremberg. But I don't think that I don't see any evidence that the Iranians have put any funding or any effort into carrying out any form of operation whatsoever. I just believe that's nonsense. And I think that the Israelis, if they passed on that, and I would imagine that the Israeli regime did that they passed on that sort of information to humiliate Trump or to make him fear being assassinated or whatever the agenda is. But again, either the Israelis, their intelligence is awful, which, as I said, they're not nearly as good as they claim to be, as the war has shown. And again,
unless they fed Trump false intelligence, which I'm in that camp.
Yeah, or they fed him false intelligence in this case, or elsewhere. But bombing, let's say, where I live is known. So if the Americans and the Israelis bomb my house, it's not an intelligence coup. Everyone in the neighborhood, from the supermarket guy to the hair, the barber shop, they all know where my home is. So and the same is true with others. Assassinating Iranians by firing missiles at their apartment buildings is not an intelligence coup. That's just how the United States and the Israeli regime work. They are utterly barbaric, and this is where sometimes, because when you say like, this is terrible, what's happening to the United States and the Chinese, or I saw something you were doing a show with someone about the economy, and I listened in, and you were saying this is terrible, that the United States is falling back. I don't see the United States as morally superior to any country on this planet. In fact, I consider them the most morally inferior, the U.S. government on this planet, after the Israeli regime. I prefer Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela, well, the former Venezuela,
North Korea,
any country to these two
North
countries.
Korea.
Oh yes, definitely. North Korea has never used chemical weapons against other nations.
Doesn't mean they wouldn't if they have the capacity.
Yeah, well, I don't know. They haven't done it yet. But North Korea doesn't, rape prisoners to death in prison and then the rapists are celebrities on TV and they go on TV shows. Well, the United States supports it, so the values are the same. If God forbid, well, I don't even want to give the example, but if A carries out all sorts of atrocities and then B, meaning me, aids them in carrying out those atrocities, there's not much difference. Without B, A could never do those things.